Today's guest is Tim Burrowes. He is the co-founder of Mumbrella, wildly successful online media publication, and is currently running and growing a similar platform, online media publication called Unmade. This episode is fascinating. It's filled with a deep dive into the business model of online publications, and I was really amazed by how the whole system works, but the component that actual live events play in the success of those kind of platforms. So I know you'll find this fascinating. Let's dive straight in. Tim Burrowes, thank you so much for joining me in the virtual studio. How are you, mate?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to join you today.
Super cool. I get the opportunity to speak to people from all around Australia and all doing amazing things. But this interview is actually one of the joys I get is meeting people for the first time on these episodes. And you are a recommendation from Abe Udi, absolute legend in a past episode. So yeah, thanks again for being with us. We're going to dive into what you're currently doing, what you've done, and we're going to unpack that whole journey. I'm really excited to learn heaps myself and share lots of wisdom, I'm sure, with our listeners. But Tim, why don't you start with Unmade? Tell us a little bit about what is Unmade and what does it look like? What's the scale and what kind of business?
Well, hey, and thank you for the invitation. Now, I record a lot of podcasts as the interviewer, and I have to tell you, there's a lot less work in being the guest because you don't have to do any of that prep. So, yeah. I'm enjoying the turning of the tables already. So Unmade, we're in the publishing industry, publishing and events. So our audience are people working in the world of media and marketing. As we record, we're about to hit our 3-year anniversary. By the time this goes up, I suspect we will have hit it. So the central organising rhythm, I suppose, is an almost daily newsletter which publishes out of Substack. And then we also organise kind of conferences and events around niches of the media and marketing industry. And it's a fairly distributed team. I'm in regional Tasmania. A couple of our other members of our team are in regional New South Wales, another member in Sydney, and so on. Quite a small team, but yeah, we're although most of our audience is in the cities, often we are not.
Yeah. I love that. Well, that's a qualifying factor as to how you're on this podcast, regionally based business. I've got to say right up front, Tim, that I have little to no history, understanding of publishing or media industry. So this is going to be heaps of fun diving in. You're going to have to forgive my ignorance. I'm like a blank slate when it comes to this industry. So I want to unpack a little bit about Unmade again. So you distribute through a newsletter is as predominant. Can you tell me, share a bit how that works? So are you how you're building your newsletter database and what kind of content do you pump out through that newsletter?
Yeah, so we sort of, I guess, zoom backwards and forwards. So I sold my previous business, which was Mumbrella, towards the end of 2017, myself and a couple of other business partners in that, and I carried on working for the business for some time. But then in 2021, I had some reasons, some family reasons for needing to be based back in the UK for a while, but wanted to carry on writing for an Australian audience because that sort of was where my expertise was, and I knew I'd be coming back. So I decided, okay, well, I'll launch another newsletter in that space. The nature of publishing, as a sort of business is, they often say the best number of revenue streams is many. So you want to be able to kind of have a tier where you're charging for some paid subscriptions. If you run a conference, you can sell tickets, you can sell sponsorships. Obviously, you can take advertising on the newsletter as well. And where we were very fortunate in earning some time to build an audience, which is what you need if you want to charge for ads, was sort of wearing my journo hat. I had interviewed the founder of Substack, which is one of the kind of independent publishing platforms, kind of now based in the US, but this Kiwi guy called Hamish Mackenzie. And when it was kind of time to launch, I reached out to him because I knew that Substack had a program they'd been doing for journos, to effectively persuade them to come across to the platform and sort of, go it alone. So they were kind enough to sign me up for almost like the final tranche of what was then called, I think, Substack Pro. And as well as providing some decent funding for that year, they also provided all the tools you need to kind of go it alone. So they provided some design resource. They provided a year's subscription to Getty Images, so you sort of had good photography. They provided I think it was 12 hours a month of free audio editing, which you could choose who you work with on that. So that was where we have something in common, because it was Abe Udy who and Abe's Audio who we used for the audio editing and still do to this day.
Awesome.
And that really just equipped us so that we were able to establish ourselves in that first year. And then by the time the year was up and we'd begun to find an audience, that was a moment that we could then begin to sell advertising and start to sort of monetize in another way.
Wow. I love that. And tell me a little bit about more of your subscriber base, like and what content you mostly deliver on Unmade.
Yeah, so the lens we look at it through is Unmade is for anybody who works somewhere in the media and marketing industry. Now, depending how you measure it, that might be 200, maybe 300,000 people in Australia. It's kind of like, some would identify with that world more than others within that group. And for us, I suppose people working in marketing count double, because they hold budgets, and that means that media agencies and media owners want to talk to those people. So that's where the kind of the business model of the advertising comes in, because people will pay decent amounts to talk to that audience in particular. So when we look at any kind of story or article for the day, or come to that, when we're putting on a conference session, you're always just asking yourself the question of, how does this affect my audience member in their working life or in their career? How are we going to help them do their job better, or how are we going to help them get their next job better? So we kind of it's very much in a kind of audience first approach of, I would always say to journalists over the years, if you can have in that third paragraph of your article explaining why this story is important to your reader, then it's probably the correct piece that you're writing.
Yeah, I love that. And I find myself in the marketing world more and more. So you might be gaining an audience member as I dive deeper into the
one heart at a time.
Yeah, one heart at a time. I'm thinking about this, going, man, you could be writing to me. and there are so many like tools. I'd love your business model in the audience being kind of that double up, as you say. Like, it is they're a great audience to sell advertising to, because we're in advertising and marketing, and we need a lot of tools and we need a lot of platforms, and there's lots of learning to be done. So that's really, really cool. Before we rewind, I'm going to rewind all the way back to Tim Burrowes' starting in business and unpack. You've mentioned already Mumbrella, which I've been saying to a few people. I've got an interview coming up with Tim Burrowes and from Mumbrella, and a few people have gone, "Oh, really? Wow, that's cool." And a few people have gone, "What's that? What's Mumbrella?" I'm like, "Come on, Mumbrella." But we're going to rewind and we're going to go all the way back there. But I want to just see Unmade 3 years in, what is some wins, some successes, some moments that you can hang your hat on and be really proud about the journey of, and what Unmade is now.
Hey, look, and I'm keen as we chat that we don't always talk about the wins, because I think one of the real truths of any business is you have plenty of setbacks as well. I think that the main thing for us is each year we've scaled. So in that first financial year, our turnover wouldn't have been much more than $100,000, give or take. Pretty much doubled in a bit in year 2, and then year 3 where I forget the exact number, I would have read in zero, but let's call it 550,000 turnover.
Yes.
Each year, I often joke that it was kind of an accident, but we're a not-for-profit so far. But fortunately not too much of a loss either. So we've broadly scaled and broken even. And what we've done is we've grown the team, and we've tended to spend that on bringing on more team members and moving people up from part-time to full-time. Just very recently I've started to pay myself a salary, which I wasn't able to take for the first couple of years. So I suppose that, for any startup as young as us, win number one is just surviving to this point, to hit that 3-year mark. So that counts as a win. We sort of built the audience, more than 20,000 people getting the daily email now, of which, a much smaller subset of the kind of the paying subscribers. So paying members just under 300, but that's at a fairly kind of aggressive price point of $650 a year. So there's a fair bit of value there for that money, but obviously it's not right for everybody. So a big part for us going forward will be to kind of build on those, that number, because at the moment, our revenues from that one revenue stream of paying members is about $100,000 a year, which is kind of an annoying amount, really, because it's too big to ignore, but it's too little to really move the dial.
Yeah, I hear you there. No, those are 100% wins. I remember early in my journey, and I definitely didn't double, and almost double in the 3rd year. So kudos to you. But the ability to scale and grow the team, and to say, hey, look, 3 years in, we must be doing some really some good things. Having that amount of people paying attention to what we're doing and consuming the content that we produce and finding it valuable, that's massive. I don't know many businesses that, at least that I've talked to so far, that could say, hey, our readership or the people that are finding value from what we do is 20,000. That's a pretty big number. You imagine 20,000 people in front of you saying, hey, Tim, thanks. I'm getting value from what you're doing. That's phenomenal. That's crazy. Yeah,
look, no, we've definitely been pleased to find it. And I think, one of the, I suppose, benefits of having been publishing in that space before is a bit of a double-edged sword, because you don't want it to be too much about you, because that challenges your scalability. But if you do have a brand in the space, then you have to make the most of your personal brand as well.
Yeah, 100%. And so that's an interesting point, though. How have you found that kind of journey? Have you lent hard one way or the other?
Look, I think so far very much lent into it, just because you use the assets that you have when you're trying to scale, you're trying to find the audience. when there's a, in that tiny niche that you're in, if there is some recognition, then you want to make the most of it. But I'm I suppose quite conscious of the fact that that this being a kind of, I guess, the second rodeo, there's definitely a moment when, as you want to scale, you don't want things to be too associated with you personally, because that becomes a real bottleneck to scaling then.
Yeah, totally. So let's rewind. Let's go back to the start, and I want you to tell me, where did Tim Burrowes start in business, in the publishing industry, and then take us to Mumbrella and the heights and all the good stuff and the challenges involved in that.
Look, I suppose officially I started in business in 2008 when I was one of the team that started Mumbrella. The truth is, when I look back now, I realise there were a few moments when I am still a journalist first and foremost, I think, but when I was kind of, an employed journalist, where I just saw certain things happen and it gave me the confidence or knowledge to think, okay, I can see the business model here. So I came up through local newspapers in the UK. Then I became a kind of more specialist journalist. So initially writing for a magazine which was for doctors working in the National Health Service in the UK. And that, that sort of was my introduction to the specialist press, but then moved across from editor of that title to editor of a publication called Media Week. And all of a sudden I'm writing about the world of media and marketing. So that was probably about 2002 or something. Now, one of the things that I sort of, began to see along the way was just how businesses worked. And, I'd seen Hospital Doctor magazine run an awards process for their audience that was well sponsored and was quite financially successful. And similarly, I then crossed over to Media Week, and they had a similar awards process where people paid to enter, people paid to sponsor, people paid to have tables on the night. And again, you saw this thing, but they were things that were already running. The juggernaut was already moving down the street. So you sort of like, starting seemed like such a hard thing. And I think the first thing two things began to open my eyes to it. One was we launched a conference with Media Week in the UK called Media 360, and seeing it from the start and it become a thing and a community, that opened my eyes a bit. And I was very much just on the periphery of that one. But then a couple of years later, I was asked to go over to Dubai to be the launch editor of the Middle East edition of Campaign magazine, which is a sort of franchise of, I guess, the most famous British title for advertising creatives, maybe even not just in Britain, but maybe in the world. But, Campaign is a sort of super famous brand. And we launched this franchise, and within a few months, we ran our first Campaign Middle East Awards. And the only brief I was given by my boss was, don't lose too much money. And then I remember the day when the entries started arriving, and this was the day when people would send in physical entries. And all of a sudden, just this whole office, there was no room to walk anymore because there was so much stuff coming through the door. And, man. Again, it was long enough that physical checks were arriving. And it was just this sort of, huge commercial win right from year one. And just to see that sort of go from just an idea and a thought and I've seen this executed somewhere else, I think we can do this, and then to execute it from scratch, that's when you start getting some sort of confidence that maybe you can sort of pull some business levers. So I came to Australia after Campaign Middle East as editor of B&T magazine, which was way back in the day, used to stand for broadcast and television, but is just now known generically as B&T. And, similarly was involved in helping launch an awards process for them. You'll gather that awards are quite an interesting part of the the kind of business model for publishing businesses. And then after 2 years of that, along with a sort of, a former colleague there and somebody that he knew, we decided to do our own thing, which was Mumbrella. And I'm interested what you were saying about how some people are impressed by the name. For the first 2 or 3 years, it was very much me saying again and again on the phone to receptionists, like umbrella with an M in front.
That's great. So good. Because I had my experience with Mumbrella was really in creating avatars for videos that we were making for clients. We would say, where do they get their information from online? Are they like just only get online and punch something into Google, or do they have like a favorite news publication, media publication? And our example would always be Mumbrella. And to be honest, I can't even remember where I found out about Mumbrella. Like, I have no idea. But tell me a little bit about the growth journey of that business, the business model. I'm super interested in unpacking. But then what was the process of growing that to what it became, where someone, in Bendigo, Victoria, just randomly somehow knows about it?
Yeah. So we started in late 2008. And at the time, I had the terrible idea that we should do a series of PDF newsletters for different parts of the media and marketing world. So a newsletter for advertising agencies, one for media agencies, one for, journalists or whatever.
Yeah.
And PDF, people sort of say perhaps correctly, but disparagingly, that's for... that's digital for old-fashioned print people who don't really get the new world. And fortunately, because it was not that long before Christmas, rather than launch the PDFs, I just threw together a WordPress site. Thought, okay, this will be the receptacle for some of this content. And similarly, it was just as email had become cheap as well, which even a couple of years before it hadn't been. So we were able to knock together this pretty basic, initially just a blog with a single stream of content, which was, just hit a moment where the two other main titles, B&T, which I'd worked at, and Ad News, were both, although they did have a daily publication, they were both still predominantly print-based, and they certainly weren't really doing very much to update through the day. So we just immediately had a point of difference by being digital first, updating all the time, trying to have the interesting conversation going on in the comments thread. And it was also right as social media was coming through, and particularly Twitter, and the sort of people who were kind of early adopters for that tended to be from our world. So what would happen would be, I would tweet something out, the conversation would then happen underneath the article. And then by the time we sent out the email, there was already a conversation going that then just fired up. So the comment thread became as big a part as the actual articles themselves. So it became quite self-fulfilling as it went. So it just, it became a part of the conversation. So of course, you think at the time, aren't we being smart, developing this audience and it growing so fast? Yes. And then you look back now, you were so lucky in timing, just as to go digital, just as WordPress became stable, to go, just as email became cheap, just as social media became prevalent. And I also look back and that WordPress stable thing was really important. It was because there was a point when we were growing and the website kept falling over. And then, then one day I kind of had a phone call from a web developer in Hervey Bay, funnily enough. You talk about the regional things who discovered us, I guess, in the same way that you did. And this was a guy called Ben May, who now owns a big web development company called The Code Co. But at the time, I think it was just Ben. And he was like, I can see you need some help. And hey, good business hustling. And, to this day, I guess 15 years later, Mumbrella is still a client of his, but
Wow.
and I think maybe it's never fallen over once since the day he took over. So yeah, you know, you need a bit of help along the way scaling, I guess.
Yeah, massive. Yeah, that's crazy.
You should get Ben on your podcast. Actually, now I think of it.
I've already mental note, already gonna ask Tim afterwards to hook me up with Ben. Okay, so that's cool. So did you implement any of what was the business model from Umbrella in its entirety? Did you implement any of the awards things? I kind of know about that, but can you kind of unpack that process and development for me?
Yeah, we did. We did a number of things. So initially, the first way we monetized was ads on the email and ads on the website. So, you know, that again will be very similar. It would generally be ads from media companies who want to say to marketers, you should spend more money with us. We've got this, you know, great TV show you should have your ads on. So it was ads about ads in a weird way, but that was, you know, that was the sector we were in. And that was, hey, look, that was a good business model because it's a specialist business model and people would pay quite a premium to talk to that really narrow niche audience. And then we started playing in events, you know, and it was all about, you know, kind of doing stuff for the communities. So you might just start off with a breakfast with a sort of question time with 4 interesting people on the panel from within the industry, maybe 100 people in the room. People pay a little bit to, you know, to come to the breakfast and ask the questions. You might get a podcast out of it from the content as well, and there might be a sponsor involved. So that sort of began to scale. And then there were probably there were 2 key things really which really helped us scale on the event side. One was we launched a conference called Mumbrella 360, and we decided that we were going to try and be big right from year one. And the idea being that it was for anybody working in the media and market industry, there would be something for you at any time. So we sort of took over a couple of floors of the Hilton in Sydney. We did a big call out to the industry to kind of propose sessions. So it was very much of the community. And yeah, we had certainly in the low thousands, I want to say maybe 2,000 people through the door on that very first one. And it became really self-fulfilling because it felt successful. That meant advertisers and sponsors wanted to be involved. And because we worked really hard at making the content good, and also people who wanted to be on stage worked really hard at what they proposed, it meant that for the ticket buyer, it was a really good experience. So we had 2 really kind of strong complementary revenue streams. So that really helped. And then, as you allude to, we also did we launched the Mumbrella Awards. And again, you know, we sneaked in year one because it was actually quite crowded in the industry sort of already with very, you know, I'd helped launch the B&T Awards, so it was my own fault really. But but we kind of decided that our point of difference would be these awards would be really meaningful, really hard to win, really good jury that would judge live. So people, if they wanted to win the award, would have to go in and present to the jury. And what that meant was there was real buy-in to coming along on the night, because if teams had just presented, you know, a month before to the jury, they're really going to want to find out if they've won. So that first year, we had about 1,000 people in the Star Event Centre in Sydney, and again, we'd sort of, you know, created this new kind of thing. So that I think was sort of maybe stage 1 and stage 2, and then the sort of third stage to round out our event side of the business was kind of later in the process with Mumbrella. You know, when it felt like maybe we were struggling to get to the next level of scaling, we brought in some help. A chap called Tony Four, who these days chairs a couple of a few companies, including at least one ASX listed one. But he came in and he advised myself and Martin Lane, who was my business partner involved in the business, and also worked with our sales team. So we do half a day with me and Martin, half a day with the sales team. And his thing was repeatable processes. That was like his mantra,
Nice.
build repeatable processes. And something we found was, each time we were reinventing every conference we did. But once we started doing a travel marketing summit and an automotive marketing summit and a finance marketing summit, and we had the same methodology for putting together the content and the same methodology for booking the venue and the same methodology for selling the tickets, it all became so much more convenient. And that was really like the moment where we began to really, find some scale.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that rings true for a lot of different businesses that I have interviewed on this podcast and past clients of mine. The moment that things really take off is when you can free the business from being trapped in someone's head and really put some repeatability, as you say, repeatability around systems and processes so that things are optimized, things are done efficiently and consistently. And it's wild the difference that makes on, say, a team member internally delivering it and how successful and fast they're going to be able to do that, but also like a consumer, a customer, an audience member knowing what to expect, and then that process being really smooth and enjoyable for them. I had no idea how huge events were in a publishing business like Mumbrella. This is blowing my mind. So did you have to be on one side, journalism, really good journalist, brain, head for creating good content, as well as have this event skill, management skill? How did you deliver that practically? Did you bring in event managers and all that kind of thing, or how did that work?
Yeah, in two parts. For the actual content of the events, I've always thought of that as a form of journalism. We always try to have our event curators as journalists, as close to the beat as possible, because they understand what the issues are that people are going to be interested to hear about at the conference. They should already know who they should be approaching as speakers. Hopefully they've even got relationship with them as contacts so they can invite them. So I always think that a journalist-led event is stronger anyway. So it's another form of what your brand is already doing. It's just another execution. But then beyond the kind of the curation, there's obviously the operations side of it, which absolutely you need professional help with. And that first year of Mumbrella 360, as I say, which was like more than 1,000 people, we didn't know what we'd bitten off, in all honesty. So there was me coming up with the content. There was my colleague Denise, who had been sort of the events person we were sharing office space with TNT magazine, which was like the backpackers magazine. He used to be given away in like local pubs and stuff. And, this became just a project for Denise, who, goodness knows, I mean, we were both doing crazy hours that first year because we didn't know how little we knew, because we launched this in the February 2011. And the event was in the June, which was a crazy timeline. We should have done it over a year. And sometimes this is one of the problems is the second time round, when you do know what work is involved, is you'll sometimes put things off. Whereas sometimes just, dumb luck and stupidity, you might just go ahead and do it, even if it almost kind of kills you in the process. So, but that was one of the things about as it scaled, was we gradually were able to bring in event specialists into the team who would just be about, kind of putting together really detailed run sheets and just taking on the kind of management of things, so it was no longer organic. So that's definitely, again, a part of the scaling, I suppose.
Wow. Yeah, that makes me nervous just thinking about it, having an event of that scale to be created and launched and delivered in that time frame. That's wild. Good job.
Hey, look, the experience was, once it was over, particularly for the first few years, you didn't actually, in all honesty, feel much joy. It was just an enormous sense of relief. I'd say, the first Umbrella 360 was 2011, and the first one I enjoyed would have probably been about 2017 or 2018.
Wow, that's good persistence, and hopefully not a lot of PTSD accrued throughout the delivery of those events. But no, that's really interesting. Tell me, what were some of the wins and some of the challenges in growing Mumbrella to where it ended up before you left the business?
Look, I think one of the hard things, of course, is when you're in business with a business partner, you have ups and downs. So there were two partners in this one. There was one who had owned TNT magazine and provided the space, but wasn't active within the business. And then there was my colleague, sort of Martin, who sort of ran the business side while I ran the content side. And over time, creative tension can just become tension. So sometimes, the hardest things actually would be we would just bump up against each other a lot. So yeah, honestly, looking back now, I'm kind of, this weird driven individual myself. So, I'm very hard to work with, and, vice versa, I'm sure. So, if, you don't really know when you go into business with someone quite what you're getting until you're well and truly in the three-legged race, and then you're kind of in it. So I think one of the challenges was getting from launch to exit without killing each other in the process.
Yes. Oh man, I can relate so hard to that. Without delving into, finer details, what is some advice that you could give to someone who might be, one, either considering going into business with a business partner, or they're already in and they're listening to this and they're going, oh man, I hope this can be successful. I hope we can work at this and make it work. What advice would you give?
Yeah, look, along the way, at one point there were four of us as partners, and one of the things we were very happy to have when when four became three was a very well written document, shareholders agreement, which had been drawn up for us by a lawyer very early on, and that proved to stand up to the test of somebody leaving the organisation. There was a set down way of them leaving that was fair to everybody. So I think that's one of the key things, is have a really robust, detailed shareholders agreement if you are going to be partners in the business, that you understand, you plan for just not just for when it goes well, but also for when it doesn't. Yeah, because inevitably tension in any close working relationship, tension's going to be it's a natural part of working, right? And there's few situations that provide less tension than one partner or multiple partners wanting to exit. That can be a really tense time. So yeah, good advice there. So it's a bit remiss of me to be speaking like everyone knows what Mumbrella is and the scale. And tell me, were you able to grow Mumbrella to in terms of a audience reach, revenue, and what did the scale of the business look like? Yeah, so our audience, we were very broadly doing about, one of the metrics we used to look at a lot was number of page views per month, which, in the back of my mind, it was always 1 million page views a month is a good month. So that was the sort of number and rhythm we were working to. So that was obviously the online component. Then you had, the number of people subscribing to the email, which, I want to say maybe that got to sort of, I can't quite remember in all honesty now, but let's say sort of 40,000 or something like that. And again, but you also defined by what your actual open rate was, which, maybe sometimes it might be sort of, 7,000 or 8,000 people to that day's email. So that was a part of it. In terms of size, And we did, if anyone's super interesting, if you do a bit of Googling, I used to write an annual report for the readers each year. It was just, the headline Mumbrella is 1, Mumbrella is 2, and so on, where I try and tell as much of the story as possible, which I now do with Unmade. So I think by the time this comes out, the Unmade is 3 emails should be out there. Nice. But, we would try and share. I mean, that was the thing. The great thing is, everyone's a bit private about their numbers, but often there's no reason to be. So we would try and share everything. So I'm trying to remember turnover. I think, and bear with me, is a number of years now. I think we got up to about a turnover of about maybe 7 or 8 million when we when we sold, and we were sort of closing on. I can't remember if we actually did it or not, but we were closing on a sort of profit number of about $1 million a year, give or take, in a good year where all of the planets aligned.
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, that's really cool. And Ed, like I said earlier, I've got no idea about media publications. So this is all really fascinating. And I love that you are so open and willing to share numbers. And it's always been a fascinating thing for me because I speak in numbers all the time. Like they're a key part of the metric of my success of my services, my videos that we produce here. Have to make an impact and make a difference with the clients that I'm working with. And I'm often dealing with how much money did this make back? What's the return on investment? What scale of impact did it have in the business, and what does that mean on a dollars basis? It's always been a confusing thing for me too. Is like why are people precious or private when it comes to your business numbers? It's an interesting point. So that's awesome. Your exit, are you able to share who you was sold to and how that process unfolded?
Yeah. There's a couple of bits which are sort of covered by non-disclosure, but ask whatever you like, but there might be one or two bits I can't say. But kind of really what happened was, as I say, there was a third business partner who wasn't active in the business, so wasn't taking a salary, and he'd been a very patient man, really, because it had been a long journey. It was getting on for 10 years by that point, and he'd not really taken much out from it. So in part, we were looking for an exit for him. Now, I think maybe I hadn't fully acknowledged in my own mind, but there was also the psychology of at some point our race as business partners might come to an end. So I think that was perhaps in the back of my mind was bigger than I realised as a means of going our own separate ways. But yeah, the process that we went through was we worked with a specialist in running exits for broadly media companies. So he helped us, and for basically it was a kind of a preparation fee and then a percentage success fee. He helped us build a really kind of strong headline document, sort of teaser document and information memorandum. And then it became a roadshow where, you would talk to different types of organizations that might be interested, which went from publishing companies to, potential, to existing rivals to people doing the same thing in other parts of the world who might be interested in having an Australian presence. And in the end, we exited to a company called Diversified Communications, which is still privately owned, long owned family business out of Maine in the US. Not the cool Maine, but the kind of the other Maine.
I didn't know there was two.
You've kind of got the cool hipster Maine on the west coast, and then you've got the other Maine kind of just a bit up from New York.
Okay,
but they were broadly an expo business around the world, but had interest in sort of doing more in the media space. So we made that exit in late 2017. which was a two-year lock-in. No, tell a lie. No, it was a 2-year management leadership, but sort of 4-year non-compete process.
Yep, sure. So, and that's how you kind of maintained working in that transition period for the business throughout the exit plan.
So for the first 2 years, I carried on in exactly the same role when we were incentivized to make sure that we carried on doing good numbers, right through to the end as part of the sale process. And then I carried on working for them after that. I love writing about the media and marketing industry. And I had some personal reasons for maybe wanting to live in the UK for a while. So I had been talking to them about potentially launching an umbrella in the UK. And even got as far as doing my first research visit, and I think it was February 2020. And then the world kind of changed after that, so there was no second research visit.
No, I bet. Wow. Yeah. Look, yeah, things changed a little bit. How did that impact your world of media and online publication?
Well, look, for the world we wrote about, it was huge. I mean, it was, I guess, for so many people, but it was a disruption that, there's only so many different ways of saying the word unprecedented, aren't there? But, most advertising just switched off like a tap for that industry. So, there really hadn't been a time like it. For publications like Umbrella and all of the other ones in that space, there was an awful lot of pivoting going on, as particularly ones who had kind of an event component to their business. But a lot of them found that by sort of pivoting to online events, they actually did get to keep a fair bit of their kind of committed revenue. So, a lot of people came through, probably stronger than you would have expected.
Yep. Yeah. It was similar. Well, similar for us in that we had to just rethink how we brought in revenue, but it made us a lot stronger in that a lot of people couldn't do in person, right? And we had we didn't, other than filming with people in person, there was that component which was a little bit tricky to manage sometimes, but we got a lot more work in, right? And so did you find any of that in terms of your engagement, being an online-based delivery platform? Did you see an increase in engagement and activity online? There was, all around the world, there's people just like hanging out at home. And I know I was spending a lot more time online.
Look, I suppose initially, one of the things about being obviously a very digital publication anyway, was that we were quite well set up for just working from home, producing stuff. So we maybe didn't have as bumpy a changeover as some did. I suppose that was the moment when I became a regional person rather than a city person, because I already, owned more as a weekender, the place in Tasmania where I'm talking to you from now. But March 2020 was when that became home. Sort of the day they announced they were closing the Tasmanian border happened to be the day I was on the Hume Highway with a car full of stuff. So
wow.
So I then got to, obviously then became 100% working from home, because I was in a different state to where most of the rest of the team was. And then the other way it changed for me was I then took some long service leave to write a book. So I carried on just sort of working one day a week to write the weekend newsletter, but for the rest of the time was kind of writing I wrote a book about the media industry called Media Unmade. So that took me through the second half of 2020 and into early 2021. But yeah, it was one of those industries that is very much centered on Sydney and Melbourne. And of course they both went through lockdowns. So yeah, the in-person thing just was not the same thing.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, quite the journey for everyone in the whole world. Funnily enough, at that time. So tell me a little bit about. Let's kind of round our conversation towards a close here with some gold nuggets. I want to. You mentioned earlier in the episode, and I'm so glad you did. That a lot of the value that we get as business leaders is through mistakes, is through things that we didn't intend to happen, sometimes real challenging, wouldn't have picked it to happen if we had a choice, but we go through them and we learn because of them, and we're able to achieve greater things because of them. I'm wondering if any key learnings come to mind from mistakes or challenges, failures that were really helpful.
Yeah, a couple of things. I suppose one thing is, because I also write about media and marketing businesses now, I get to see them go well, I get to see them go badly. So one of those frustrations is I can sometimes see that in my own business, where I kind of think, I know this business well enough to know we're not doing it as well as we could. So that I suppose is a frustration kind of in its own right. But if I look back at the lessons, where we've tried something that's failed, the ones where I'm 100% glad that we did it are the ones where we know that we gave it everything, that we executed, and it was just the wrong strategy. The ones that are really annoying are the ones where we don't execute very well and we still don't know at the end whether it would have worked if only we'd done it better.
Yeah, that's such good wisdom, because you're in such a predicament there, right? At the end of something that you know you didn't do the best job of, you're still no wiser, right? So have you got any examples of like genius ideas that you thought like in the moment you're like, this is going to work, and you gave it everything and it just didn't work?
Yeah, probably two examples. One where we tried it and I think we gave it everything we could and it failed was we bought a magazine. We bought a magazine called Encore, from our old employers, Reed. So it was about the film production industry.
I know Encore, yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm afraid we killed it. So we what we wanted to do was it was very much about the art and craft of filmmaking, and it hadn't made money for many years. So we wanted to make it a bit more about the business. Now, obviously, if it had hung on until streaming came along, then it would have absolutely thrived. But our kind of move was to turn it into a weekly sister publication to Mumbrella, which would be more feature-led, and it would be tablet first, because this was as iPads were coming through and everyone thought that iPads were going to, save publishing. So we did a really great product that we were really proud of, and I think we probably lost a couple of $100,000 on it, but we learned an awful lot. It disciplined us to create a new sort of content, long form content. So it added to the overall product. But at the end, when we closed it, we knew that it just wasn't going to work. It wasn't like, if we'd done it a bit better, would it have done? We were really proud of the product, but just wasn't going to work and had to close it. So that was one where you knew. And then I suppose the one where I always think, God, it could have been different, was we launched a pay product at Mumbrella that was sort of about a database of which advertising agencies work with which brands and which clients, and we never nailed the marketing of it. So to me, I still think that one could have been a success if we'd got the marketing right. Yeah. I can see what you're saying there, because on that little description, I go, I always want to, look at an ad or look at a piece of creative and know who made it, and look at, a production company and see what clients they're working with. There could, I see what you're saying. It could have been, what could have been?
And it's fascinating. You share about Encore. Another one that I'd bumped into like on magazine shelves in supermarkets or wherever it was, and I was always fascinated and really interested in the film industry. So lots of stories and interesting BTS stuff about film consumed through Encore. May it rest in peace. So, okay, so onwards to Unmade. Back to Unmade. What is the vision for the future of Unmade? Where are you taking this thing, Tim? What do you want to see it achieve?
Yeah, so I suppose, the first thing to say is the trade press is quite crowded now. Umbrella came along, nobody's exited that market, so along comes Unmade. So you need a point of difference. So for us, it's very much about everything that you write should really be worth reading. So some people choose to cover every single press release and every single thing, and they might write 20 stories a day, but a lot of it will be quite commoditized stuff that are in other places. So our thinking is, everything we do, whether it's a conference, whether it's something written, should be, even if we're not charging for it, should be worth paying for, should be worth the audience time. So that's the key point of difference. But still with that bullseye of, we're for anyone who works in media and marketing, we want to kind of add some value to your day if you choose to give us a few minutes to read.
Love that. And I can't believe I didn't ask you already, but the name Unmade, what's the story behind the name?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, firstly, it does sum up the state of this industry, the media industry at the moment. There's never been a time where it's been so in flux. So that's a part of it. And obviously it also sort of links back to I published a book with Hardy Grant back in 2021, which is called Media Unmade. So that sort of became a bit of a cue for it as well, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. And if people want to check out, either get your book and dive into that, or they want to follow what you're doing, what are the best places that they can find out those two?
You'll find us on the web at unmade.media. None of that highfalutin .coms or .com.aus, just unmade.media.
Love it.
You'll find, the daily email is you get most of it for free, so do sign up. And then, by all means, hunt me down on LinkedIn. I'll always accept an invitation. So I'm Tim Burrowes, Burrowes. It's always the E that everybody forgets.
That's awesome. Hey, Tim, thanks so much. As we kind of wrap up this episode, is there any parting wisdom that you want to share with our listeners, whether it be business, top tips in business, or specifically tips for media and publishing business people or business leaders?
Always go to the toilet before leaving the pub.
That's got to be my favorite tip. Please explain.
I'm afraid I've stolen it from Suggs, the lead singer of Madness. I once heard him ask that piece of advice, and I've never had the opportunity to use it before, but I always think of it when I'm leaving the pub.
Saves a really hurried rush home, or that's a wisdom that I will.
And actually, I suppose now I think of it, I will give you one regional version. Is
all right, go.
Just because you're on your Rex flight and you think you're about to land, and you think you could make it, just plan for the possibility that suddenly there'll be a storm and you have to circle over the airport for the next hour.
I love that so much. Quick story that relates to that. There was one time I was on a flight, and you know how when that's the moment, right? The landing takes longer than you think it's going to, and they turn on the seatbelt sign and they say no getting up, and it's like half an hour later. Sometimes you're on the ground and you're out in the airport. So younger Caleb was going, "No, I can make it. I can make it. Seatbelt sign's about to be turned on. I'm engrossed in this movie. I know I need to go, but I'm going to make it." And then the plane landed and I was like, nah, not going to make it. So I literally I was like elbows up, pushing past everyone. I was saying, look, I know there's rules to this plane, but I don't care. I'm getting to that bathroom and it is in everybody's best interest that I get there. So yeah, I would have appreciated getting that piece of advice from you much earlier than now. That's great, Tim. Hey, thanks so much for spending the time with me. That is one of the best ends to an episode I think I've ever had.
Hey, thank you so much for the invitation. Been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you really enjoyed listening, why don't you drop a comment in the comments below? Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you get updates on when all of the next ones come out. That really helps grow this little community of people that are diving into regional business and celebrating and learning more from it. So really appreciate your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.